My name is Marcus, I'm 29 years old, and my parents tried to have me declared mentally incompetent by a court of law simply because I refused to give my deadbeat brother another dollar. Before I tell you how their jaws hit the floor when my long-lost aunt, an aunt they told me was dead, walked into that courtroom with a secret they thought they'd buried forever, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. It all started on what should have been one of the best days of my life. I'd just been promoted to senior investment analyst at Meridian Financial. We're talking a corner office on the 45th floor, a salary that finally made all the years of struggle worth it, and the kind of security I'd only ever dreamed of. I was standing in the middle of my new apartment, a place I'd paid for with my own sweat and blood. The scent of fresh paint still lingered in the air, a smell I associated with new beginnings. I ran my hand along the cool, smooth surface of the quartz countertop in the kitchen, then looked out the floor-to-ceiling windows at the sprawling city skyline. For the first time, I felt like I could actually breathe. The constant, low-grade anxiety that had been my shadow for years, the feeling that I was always one step away from disaster, finally seemed to be receding. This was mine. I had built this. That's when the shrill buzz from the front door intercom shattered the peace. I wasn't expecting anyone. Through the grainy video feed, I saw them. My mother, Diana, and my older brother, Ethan. My stomach immediately tightened into a cold, hard knot. It's a feeling I'm sure some of you know. The one you get when you see a certain name pop up on your phone and your whole body tenses for a fight you don't want to have. My mother was wearing her church smile, the one that was all teeth and never, ever reached her eyes. Ethan was leaning against the brick wall outside, scrolling on his phone, already looking bored and put upon. "Marcus, honey, let us in." My mother's voice chirped through the speaker, sickly sweet. With a heavy sigh that seemed to deflate all the joy from the room, I buzzed them up. A familiar sense of dread washed over me. They stepped inside, and my mother's eyes did a quick, critical scan of my apartment. It wasn't the look of a proud parent. It was the look of an appraiser calculating value. She didn't say, "Congratulations." She didn't say, "It's beautiful." She just set her designer purse down on my new kitchen counter as if to claim a piece of it. "We need to talk about something important," she said, waving away the coffee I offered as if the very idea was an inconvenience. Ethan, meanwhile, flopped onto my new gray sofa, a piece of furniture I'd saved for 6 months to buy, and put his scuffed sneakers up on the fabric. "Yeah, big news," he said with a smirk, finally looking up from his phone. My mother took a deep breath, the classic prelude to every guilt trip she'd ever orchestrated. "Ethan has a brilliant new idea. It's called InnoSpace. It's a co-working concept that's going to revolutionize entrepreneurship." I just stared at her, my face a blank mask. Here we go again. After Green Venture, the sustainable clothing line that dissolved in the wash, and Fit Fuel, the meal delivery service that gave half its clients food poisoning. I couldn't believe they had the nerve. "And what, exactly, does this revolution require?" I asked, my voice flat. My mother's smile tightened. "We just need some startup capital to get it off the ground. A small investment. It's for family." "How much is a small investment, Mom?" She looked at Ethan, who held up 4 fingers without even looking at me. $350,000. I almost laughed out loud. It was beyond insane. They'd already burned through Dad's retirement, Mom's emergency fund, and a second mortgage on their house. They had nothing left. Except me, the new cash cow. "No," I said. The word was quiet, but it felt like a cannon blast in the silent room. Diana's face dropped. The mask was gone. "What did you say?" I said no. "I'm not funding another one of Ethan's failures." "You're being selfish, Marcus," she snapped, her voice turning to steel. "This is what family does. We support each other." "You're right," I said, the bitterness of 2 decades finally boiling over. "I supported myself through 3 jobs in college while you paid for Ethan's 3rd crashed car. I supported myself when I ate ramen for a year to save for this apartment. I'm done." My mother's eyes narrowed into slits. She stood up, grabbing her purse. "You'll regret this. Don't forget where you came from, Marcus. Blood is blood." They left, Ethan trailing behind her like a sulking toddler. As the door clicked shut, her words hung in the air, not as a plea, but as a threat. A cold chill went down my spine. At that moment, I knew this was far from over. I didn't know what they were planning, but I knew I had to be ready. I walked over to my laptop and did something I should have done years ago. I hired a private investigator. The days following that confrontation were defined by a tense, suffocating silence from my family, but my own mind was deafeningly loud. It was the eerie quiet before a hurricane, where the air is heavy and still, and you know something terrible is on the horizon. Every time my phone buzzed with an unknown number, my heart leaped into my throat. I tried to pour myself into my new role at Meridian, to lose myself in financial models and market projections, but the echo of my mother's threat was a constant, low hum in the back of my mind. It was a distraction I couldn't shake, a background radiation of dread. That's when the memories, the ghosts of my past, started coming back in waves, sharp and unwelcome. They were vivid, fully formed scenes that would ambush me at random. I'd be sitting in my corner office, looking out at the sprawling city, and suddenly the glass and steel would dissolve. I'm 13 again. I'm standing in the living room of our cramped suburban house, my hands clutching a wrinkled envelope. Inside is $112. All the birthday and chore money I'd saved for months. My goal was a new BMX bike, the one all my friends had. I could already feel the handlebars in my hands, the freedom of riding through the neighborhood without having to borrow Ethan's rusty hand-me-down, which he always held over my head. My mother comes in and kneels down in front of me, her hand gently on my shoulder. Her voice is a soft, reasonable purr. "Honey," she says, her eyes wide with sincerity. "Ethan's tech camp is a little more expensive than we thought. It's such a wonderful opportunity for his future. You know, he's so gifted with computers. This could be the thing that sets him on the right path." I remember the weight of her hand, the unspoken pressure. I look over her shoulder at Ethan, who is already packing a bag in his room, a huge, thoughtless grin on his face. He's excited. He's not thinking about where the money is coming from. He never does. "You understand, don't you, Marcus?" My mother presses gently. "It's for the family. When one of us succeeds, we all succeed." I look down at the envelope in my hands. The bike, the freedom, it all just evaporates. I slowly hand the money over. My own dream, small as it was, felt foolish and selfish in the face of Ethan's grand future. My mother hugs me tightly. "You're such a good son," she whispers. "But it doesn't feel good. Feels empty. Feels like I'm being erased." Then I blink, and I'm back in my office. The memory so real I can almost smell the pot roast my mom was cooking that day. I shake my head, trying to focus on the screen. But the ghosts are relentless. I'm at the gym later that week, trying to work off the building stress on a treadmill, and a pop song from the late 2000s comes on the speakers. Suddenly, I'm 17 again. It's the night of my senior prom. I'm not in a rented tux. I'm wearing my grease-stained uniform from the diner where I work 40 hours a week. I smell like fried onions and bleach. I'm in the back, elbow deep in a sink of hot, soapy water, my hands raw from scrubbing pots and pans. A week earlier, my parents had called a family meeting. My dad, Derek, did the talking as he always did when the news was bad. He couldn't look me in the eye. He just stared at a spot on the wall behind me. "Marcus, son, we're a little tight this month," he'd mumbled. "Ethan's SAT scores, well, they weren't great. We had to hire him a private tutor. A really good one. We can't afford both." Both. The word hung in the air between us, as if my one night, my one quintessential high school milestone, was an equal and competing expense to months of private, one-on-one tutoring for my brother who treated school like a social club. I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I just felt that familiar cold knot form in my stomach. I nodded, went to my room, and called my boss to pick up an extra shift for prom night. The worst part wasn't missing the dance. It was the phone call I had to make to Sarah, the girl I'd asked to go with me. She was so excited. I remember standing by my bedroom window, my voice barely a whisper. "I'm so sorry. I have to work. My boss needs me." The lie tasted like acid in my mouth. The disappointment in her voice was a quiet little heartbreak I never told anyone about. And another memory, this one from college. I'd won a small academic scholarship, $2,000 for maintaining a 4.0 GPA in the finance program. I was so proud. It was the first time I had been recognized for my own merit with no family involvement. I planned to use it to buy a reliable used car so I could stop taking 3 buses to my internship. I made the mistake of mentioning it during a call home. 2 days later, my mother called back. "Marcus, honey, it's an emergency," she said, her voice frantic. "Ethan's car broke down, the transmission is shot. He needs it for his new job interview. You know how important this is. There was always a new, important job interview. That scholarship money you mentioned, it would be a lifesaver. Just a loan, of course. For the family." I knew I'd never see the money again. But the guilt, the pressure, the lifetime of conditioning. I wired the money. Ethan got his car fixed. He missed the job interview anyway. I kept taking the bus. These weren't just memories. They were exhibits in a long, unspoken trial. Exhibit A, the birthday money. Exhibit B, the prom. Exhibit C, the scholarship. Each one a piece of evidence proving my role in the family. The support system, the backup plan, the invisible son whose own needs and desires were always expendable. I was the responsible one, so I could handle disappointment. Ethan was the visionary, the golden child, so he needed every resource, every opportunity. That was the mythology my parents had built, the one they recited to themselves and to the world. That night, stewing in these resurrected feelings, I called Nick Patel. We'd been best friends since our freshman year of college. Roommates who'd bonded over all-nighters fueled by cheap coffee and a shared determination to make something of ourselves. He was the only person who knew the full, unvarnished truth about my family dynamics. "You actually did it?" he said, an audible grin in his voice after I told him I'd finally said no. "You finally cut them off? Dude, I'm proud of you." I told them no, Nick. For the first time, I really meant it. Felt good. For about 5 minutes. Then it felt terrifying. "Yeah, I bet," he said, his tone turning serious. "You gotta watch your back, man. Your mom doesn't take no for an answer. She sees it as a declaration of war." "I know," I said, pacing the length of my living room. The city lights outside seemed to mock my turmoil. "That's why I hired a PI. Just to see what's out there. Bank accounts, debts, any skeletons in their closet they could try to use against me. Is that crazy?" "Crazy? No, it's smart," Nick said. As a cybersecurity specialist, he was wired to think about threats and vulnerabilities. "First thing you should do is pull your own credit report. Like right now. Make sure they haven't opened cards or taken out loans in your name. I wouldn't put it past them. These people don't play fair, Marcus. They never have. You need to be prepared for anything. And I mean anything." His words proved to be prophetic. The next week at work, the storm began to gather on the horizon. Started subtly like a change in the air pressure. I walked past a couple of colleagues from the marketing department in the hallway, and they stopped talking abruptly, offering me weird, pitying looks. Later, in the break room kitchen, I overheard my name and the word, erratic. I tried to brush it off as typical office gossip. Then, an email landed in my inbox from a colleague in another division, a guy I barely knew. The subject was checking in. The email read, "Hey Marcus, heard you might be going through a tough time with your family. Hope everything's okay. Let me know if I can take anything off your plate at work. Happy to help out." It was coated in a veneer of concern, but the message was clear. The story was spreading. My mother's poison was seeping into the foundations of my professional life. The final straw was when my boss, Sophia Chun, called me into her office. Sophia was my mentor, a sharp, no-nonsense woman in her late 40s, She'd seen something in me when I was just a hungry intern and had guided my career ever since. Her office, even bigger and more impressive than mine, had always been a sanctuary for me, a place of clear-headed strategy. Today, the air was different. It was thick with attention I couldn't place. "Close the door, Marcus," she said, her expression unreadable. I sat down in the leather chair opposite her desk, my heart starting to pound a nervous rhythm against my ribs. "I got a strange call this morning," she began, choosing her words with surgical precision. "It was from an old acquaintance of mine from business school, a woman named Carol. Turns out she's a neighbor of your mother's. Your mom had a little chat with her over the garden fence yesterday, and your name came up." "Oh," I said, trying to keep my voice neutral, though I already knew where this was going. "Carol said your mother is concerned," Sophia continued, her eyes searching mine for a crack. "Deeply concerned. She told Carol you've been under a lot of stress with the new promotion, that you've been acting unpredictably, pushing your family away during a time of need." She hinted at some kind of emotional breakdown. The sheer, breathtaking audacity of it left me speechless. My mother was methodically, poisonously, laying the groundwork. She was planting seeds of my supposed instability with anyone who would listen. "Sophia, that is an absolute lie," I said, my voice shaking slightly with a hot surge of rage. "This is a private family matter. My mother and I had a disagreement about money, a significant amount of money, and this is her way of retaliating." Sophia held up a hand, stopping me. "You don't have to explain anything to me, Marcus. I've known you for 5 years. I know your work ethic. I know your character. I know you're one of the most stable, driven people in this entire building." She leaned forward. "I'm telling you this so you know what's happening. This isn't a random piece of gossip. Someone is actively trying to paint a picture of you. Be very, very careful." I walked out of her office, a cold fury burning in my chest. This was her game. To isolate me, to discredit me, to make me look unstable to the very people who were key to the future I had worked so hard to build. She wasn't just coming for my money anymore. She was coming for my life. That night, I was working late, trying to bury my anger in a mountain of paperwork, when my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I ignored it. A minute later, a text message came through. "Mr. Reynolds, this is David Chun from Apex Investigations. I have your preliminary report ready. There are some irregularities that I believe require your immediate attention, specifically regarding a family member you may not be aware of. Please call me back at your earliest convenience." My blood ran cold. A family member I may not be aware of? My hands were trembling as I dialed the number. "Mr. Reynolds." The PI's voice was calm and professional on the other end. "Thank you for calling back. We did a deep dive into your family's public records and financial histories, as you requested. The financial side is what you'd expect. They're leveraged to the hilt, multiple lines of credit, a second mortgage. They're underwater. But we found something else. Something I think you'll find more significant." He paused, as if for dramatic effect. "Your mother, Diana, has a sister." "That's impossible," I said automatically, sinking into my office chair. The city lights outside blurred into a meaningless smear. "My mother is an only child. She told me her sister. She said she died in a car accident before I was born." There was another pause. I could hear the faint sound of papers shuffling. "Well, sir, unless there's another woman with the same name, birth date, and parents' names, your aunt is very much alive. Her name is Yvette McBride. And here's the interesting part. She's a partner at a law firm in Georgetown. A family law attorney. The world tilted on its axis and spun out of control. An aunt. A lawyer. Alive. My mother had lied to me my entire life. It wasn't a small lie. It was a monumental one. It was the erasure of a human being. Why? Why would she do that? "There's more," the PI said, his voice grim, pulling me from my spiral. "We found a record of a legal name change. For you." "What are you talking about?" I whispered. "It was filed in 1995. You were about 2 years old. Your birth certificate was officially amended. We can't see the original sealed document without a court order, but something on it, your name or your parentage or both, was legally changed. Given what you've told me about the family dynamics, and the fact that you have an aunt who is a family law attorney that you never knew existed, it's a significant red flag, Mr. Reynolds. A very significant one. I hung up the phone, my mind reeling. The lies were deeper, darker, and more tangled than I could have ever imagined. The fight wasn't just about $350,000 anymore. It was about my entire life, my very identity, which had been built on a foundation of carefully constructed secrets. My mother hadn't just threatened me. She had declared a war I never even knew I was a part of. And I finally understood. To win this war, I couldn't just defend. I had to attack. My next stop was Georgetown. I had to meet the aunt I never knew I had. The 90-minute drive to Georgetown the next morning felt like crossing into another dimension. The familiar highways were just a blur of concrete and green signs. My mind was a chaotic storm of questions, each one more destabilizing than the last. Why would my mother lie about something so fundamental? Why erase her own sister? What was on that original birth certificate? And who was this woman, Yvette McBride, this ghost who had just walked back into the world of the living? Her law office was located in a historic brick brownstone on a quiet, tree-lined street. The building exuded an air of old money and quiet competence. A polished brass plaque on the heavy oak door read, McBride and Associates Family Law. Taking a deep breath that did nothing to calm the frantic beating of my heart, I walked inside. The reception area was hushed and elegant. An older woman with kind eyes and perfectly coiffed gray hair looked up from her desk. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice soft. I'm here to see Yvette McBride," I said, my own voice sounding unsteady and foreign to my ears. "I don't have an appointment." "I'm sorry, she's booked solid today. If you'd like to leave a message." My heart sank. I couldn't just leave a message. I couldn't turn back now. "Please," I said, stepping closer to the desk and lowering my voice. "It's important. It's personal. Could you just tell her Marcus Reynolds is here. Diana Reynolds' son." The receptionist's polite smile faltered. Her eyes widened almost imperceptibly, a flicker of recognition, or perhaps shock. She picked up the phone on her desk, turned slightly away from me, and murmured a few words into the receiver. A moment later, a door opened down the hall. A woman emerged, and for a second, I felt like I was looking at a reflection in a distorted mirror, a version of myself 30 years into the future. She was in her mid-60s, with the same sharp, intelligent eyes that I'd always been told I had. Her silver hair was pulled back in a tight, elegant bun, and she wore a tailored gray suit that screamed authority. She walked with a sense of purpose, but stopped dead in her tracks when she saw me standing by the reception desk. Her professional composure vanished. Her lips parted slightly, and a name escaped them, a whisper that cut through the silent room. "Lucian." The name hit me like a physical blow. I'd never heard it before in my life, yet on some primal cellular level it felt right, felt like mine. She recovered almost instantly, her lawyerly mask slipping back into place. "I mean, Marcus?" she said, her voice now firm, though her eyes were still wide with a complex mix of emotions I couldn't begin to decipher. She knew who I was. That one whispered name confirmed it. "Come in," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. She led me down the plushly carpeted hall to her office at the end. It was a corner office, lined with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with thick legal volumes. The room smelled of old paper, lemon polish, and strong coffee. She shut the heavy door firmly behind us, creating a pocket of silence in a world that had suddenly become deafeningly loud. "I had a feeling this day would come," she said, gesturing for me to sit in one of the leather armchairs facing her large mahogany desk. She sat down, her hands folded neatly in front of her. She looked at me, her gaze intense, searching. "Though I admit," I expected it would be under different circumstances. What has Diana done now? The question opened the floodgates. The story tumbled out of me. The promotion, the new apartment, the confrontation, their demand for money, the smear campaign at my job. I told her about the private investigator, my discovery of her existence, the amended birth certificate. As I spoke, her expression shifted from professional curiosity to a grim, familiar anger. She didn't seem surprised by any of it, just deeply, profoundly saddened. "Of course," she sighed when I finished, the sound heavy with resignation. "It was always about the money, even back then." "Back then?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "Yvette, my mother told me you were dead. She said you died in a car crash." A short, bitter laugh escaped her lips. It was a sound devoid of any humor. "I'm sure she did. It was easier than telling the truth. The truth is, I was dead to her. After your grandfather, my father, passed away, he left a sizable trust fund. It was his life savings. His will was very clear. The trust was to be split evenly between his grandchildren. At the time, that was just you and Ethan." She leaned forward, her eyes locking onto mine, and I felt the full force of her conviction. I was the executor of the will. It was my duty to oversee it. Your mother, Diana, was always jealous of me. I was the one who went to law school, the one Dad was so proud of. She saw my role as executor as another way I was better than her. Within a year of Dad's death, I started noticing discrepancies. Large sums of money being moved, complex transfers, all of it ending up in accounts that benefited Ethan's so-called ventures. When I confronted Diana, she didn't deny it. She tried to justify it. She said Ethan needed it more, that he had the vision but not the resources, whereas you were the resilient one and would be fine on your own. When I told her I would have to take legal action to enforce the terms of the will, she cut me out. She launched a vicious campaign, telling the entire family that I had tried to steal from the estate and had disappeared out of shame. She created a lie, a simple, ugly story, and she stuck with it for 30 years. It was all starting to make a horrible kind of sense. The lavish camps for Ethan, the endless failed businesses, the constant, inexplicable flow of cash. It wasn't just my parents' money they were burning through. It was mine, my inheritance. "The birth certificate," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "The PI said it was changed. And you called me Lucian." Yvette's face softened, the hard lines of anger replaced by a pain that looked decades old. "That was your name, Lucian Thomas Reeves. Your father, your real father, was a good man, a brilliant architect named Thomas Reeves. He and your mother had a brief, intense relationship. He was so excited to be a father. He used to talk about teaching you how to draw, how to see the beauty in the structure of things. He died in a construction accident just a few months before you were born. When you were 2, Diana legally had your name changed to Marcus Reynolds and, I am almost certain, had Derek officially listed as your father on the amended certificate." "Derek? My dad? Does he know this?" The question felt stupid as soon as I asked it. "I believe Derek has always carried his suspicions like a stone in his shoe," Yvette said. "But he was weak. Diana could be incredibly persuasive, and frankly, I think he was terrified of her. Claiming you as his son gave them a united front. It allowed them to create the illusion of a perfect nuclear family, and more importantly, it made it easier to control the family narrative and the family money. If you were legally Derek's son, it was much simpler to argue that all the money was part of one big family pot. A pot that always seemed to empty into Ethan's pockets." I felt physically sick. My entire life, my name, my father, it was all a lie. A carefully constructed legal fiction designed to defraud me from the moment I was born. "They're trying to have me declared incompetent," I finally managed to say, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "They filed the petition. They're coming for everything I have left." Yvette's expression hardened again, this time into one of pure steel. "No," she said, her voice low and dangerous. "They are not. They have built their entire world on a foundation of lies, Marcus. and we are going to burn it to the ground with the truth. She looked at me, and I saw a fire in her eyes that I recognized because I felt it igniting in my own chest. I will help you. I will guide you through all of this. But you need more than me. I'm too close to it. You don't need a family lawyer. You need a shark. And I know just the one. She was right. This was beyond a family dispute. This was all-out war. The very next day, I found myself in a sleek, minimalist office in a downtown skyscraper, sitting across from Jessica Davenport. She was everything Yvette had promised and more. She was in her late 30s, dressed in a sharp black suit, with an aura of confidence so potent it was almost tangible. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. Yvette gave me the broad strokes, she said, her voice sharp and precise. Tell me everything. Start from the beginning. Don't leave anything out. I laid out the whole story for the second time in 2 days, but this time it was different. I had a stack of documents from my PI and a clearer understanding of the stakes. Jessica listened intently, her face impassive, occasionally jotting down a note on a legal pad. When I was done, she leaned back in her chair, tapping a pen against her chin. Let me be clear, Marcus, she said, her eyes pinning me to my seat. This is going to be ugly. They will not play fair. They will try to drag your name, your character, and your sanity through the mud. They will call your friends, your colleagues, anyone they can think of, to build their case. Are you absolutely certain you're ready for that? Are you sure you don't just want to offer them a settlement and make them go away? She was testing me, testing my resolve. The old me, the boy who gave up his birthday money, might have flinched. But not anymore. No, I said, my voice firm. There is no settlement. This isn't about money anymore. This is about the truth. A slow, satisfied smile spread across Jessica's face. Good. That's what I needed to hear. She slid a fee agreement across the table. The numbers were staggering, but I didn't hesitate. I signed it. Our first move is to go on the offensive, she said, her tone all business now. They want to question your competency? Fine. We'll welcome a full psychiatric evaluation from a court-appointed, unimpeachably neutral professional. We will subpoena every financial record they have going back 30 years. We'll show the court exactly where the money went. And we will file a motion to unseal the original birth certificate. That, Marcus, is the key. That document doesn't just unravel their narrative. Proves criminal intent. The timing of our alliance couldn't have been more critical. The very next afternoon, it happened. I was walking through the expansive marble lobby of my office building, heading out to grab a quick lunch. Marcus Reynolds? A man in a cheap, ill-fitting suit called out. I turned. He was holding a large manila envelope. The receptionist, Alyssa, a sweet girl barely out of college, looked on with wide, horrified eyes. My colleagues, heading out in a group, stopped to watch. The lobby, usually bustling with noise, suddenly fell quiet. You've been served, the man said with a smug, self-important smile, thrusting the envelope into my hands. I didn't have to open it. I knew exactly what it was. The official petition for conservatorship on the basis of mental incompetence. They had actually officially done it. They had fired the first public shot. I stood there for a moment, frozen, the lobby silent, the weight of a dozen pairs of curious eyes on me. I could feel the hot blush of shame, of pure, unadulterated humiliation, creep up my neck. I could hear what they must be thinking. What did he do? Is he crazy? This is what my mother wanted. To break me down, to shame me in front of my peers. But then, as I looked at the smug process server and the curious onlookers, something inside me shifted. The shame was instantly cauterized by a cold, hard resolve. I saw my boss, Sophia, step out of an elevator across the lobby. Our eyes met. She gave me a small, almost imperceptible nod. A look that said, I see what's happening. I'm with you. That was all I needed. I straightened my tie, tucked the envelope under my arm as if it were nothing more than the morning paper, and walked towards the revolving glass doors without a word. I got to my car in the parking garage and sat there for a full 10 minutes, my hands shaking on the steering wheel, before I could even start the engine. The public battle had begun. Let them watch. Let them all watch. This wasn't my shame to carry. It was theirs. The war had been declared, and I was finally ready to fight back. The weeks that followed were a grueling descent into a two-front war. My life became a carefully managed split screen. By day, I was Marcus Reynolds, the high-flying vice president at Meridian Financial, putting on a brave face, walking into meetings with my head held high, pretending I couldn't feel the whispers that followed me down the hallways or the pitying looks from colleagues who had heard the rumors. By night, my apartment, once a symbol of my freedom, transformed into a legal war room. The beautiful view of the city was just a backdrop to a table littered with legal documents, deposition transcripts, and takeout containers. Jessica Davenport was the general, a master strategist. She was cool, analytical, and relentless. "They're trying to build a narrative of instability, Marcus," she explained during one of our late-night sessions, her finger tracing a line on a document. "They've filed a motion to have you deposed by their psychiatrist. A real hired gun, a guy named Dr. Alistair Finch, who's known for twisting words and finding pathology in a potted plant. We're going to counter with our own motion for an impartial evaluation by a panel of 3 doctors, but we need more than just defense. We need an arsenal." Our mission was to build a fortress of truth, brick by painful brick. Nick, my best friend and cybersecurity guru, became an invaluable part of the team. He worked his magic, helping me collate and organize years of digital evidence. He recovered deleted text messages from old phones, a digital trail of my mother's manipulation. They always started with sickly sweet, just checking in, honey messages that, without fail, pivoted to a request for money. He compiled voicemails from Ethan, a litany of slurred excuses and entitled demands. We even found old emails from my parents from my college days, ones where they'd praise my 4.0 GPA in one sentence and ask if I could spare a few $100s from my part-time library job in the next, because Ethan had an unexpected expense. "This is a timeline of exploitation," Nick said, his eyes glued to the glowing screen of his laptop, the spreadsheet he'd built looking like a complex weapon. "It's not just one incident. It's a clear, documented pattern. It shows intent, Marcus. It shows that they have viewed you as an ATM, not a son. While we built our fortress, the other side was relentlessly on the attack." The smear campaign at my work, which had started with whispers, escalated. An anonymous email, clearly written by my mother but sent from a disposable account, was sent to our firm's HR department. It expressed grave concern for my well-being, hinting that the pressure of my new role was causing me to suffer from paranoia and to lash out at my supportive family. The result was a humiliating meeting in a sterile conference room with Sophia and the head of HR. I had to sit there and calmly defend my own sanity, explaining that this was a retaliatory action related to a private financial dispute. Sophia was a rock. She defended my character and my performance unequivocally. "Marcus is one of the most dedicated and clear-headed executives at this firm," she told the HR manager firmly. "I have no concerns about his ability to perform his duties. What I do have concerns about is this transparent attempt to harass one of my employees. Though the company officially stood by me, the damage was being done." The whispers grew louder. I felt like I was living under a microscope, every action and interaction being scrutinized for signs of the instability my mother was so keen to invent. The legal battle itself was a grinding, soul-crushing process. The deposition with my family's lawyer, Carson Whitfield, was a 4-hour ordeal. He was a smarmy, condescending man with a cheap suit and an expensive watch. He sat across the table from me, trying to reframe every one of my strengths as a weakness. My dedication to my career, an unhealthy obsession. My careful financial planning, a symptom of paranoia and a hoarding mentality. My refusal to give Ethan $350,000, a clear sign of a delusional break with reality and a lack of familial affection. I left that room feeling mentally violated, every part of my life twisted into something ugly and unrecognizable. One of our key strategies was to find people who had seen the real Ethan, the one who existed behind our parents' protective wall of enablement. That led us to Savannah Torres. She was Ethan's ex-girlfriend, a smart, down-to-earth woman who had dated him for nearly 2 years. Our PI found her working as a general manager at a boutique hotel downtown. I went to meet her with Yvette, hoping my aunt's calm, authoritative presence would help. We met in a quiet coffee shop. Savannah was guarded, her posture tense. "Look," she said, before we even sat down. "I just want to put that entire chapter of my life behind me. Ethan and his mother, they were a lot. We understand completely," Yvette said gently, her voice soothing. "We are not asking you to relive it for no reason. Marcus is in a terrible, terrible situation. They are trying to take everything from him, to have him declared incompetent to manage his own affairs." I explained what was happening, the lawsuit, the competency hearing, the smear campaign. As I spoke, I saw a flicker of recognition in her eyes, a shadow of the same gaslighting and manipulation she must have endured. "His mother," Savannah said, her voice dropping to a near whisper as she stirred her untouched latte. "She was the worst. She treated Ethan like a prince and me like the help. She once told me something I never forgot. We were at Thanksgiving, and Ethan had just gotten into a huge argument with Marcus on the phone about money. After he hung up, Diana came over to me, patted my arm and said with this chilly little smile, 'Marcus is so unstable, so emotional. If Ethan ever needs to protect the family from him, we have ways to handle him.'" Yvette and I exchanged a look. This was it, a direct statement of premeditation. "Do you remember anything else?" I asked, leaning forward, my heart pounding. Savannah's brow furrowed in thought. "Ethan, he was obsessed with this idea that he was going to be a big-shot podcaster or something. He was always recording things on his phone. Said it was for capturing authentic family moments. He recorded everything at that Thanksgiving." She suddenly looked up, her eyes wide with a dawning realization. "He got really drunk later that night, went on a long, rambling tirade about you. I think I might have backed up the files from that night onto an old hard drive in my closet. I was trying to edit a video for him as a gift. Took her a day to find it, but she did. She sent the audio file to Nick. When he played it for us in my apartment that night, the room went cold. It was Ethan, his voice slurred with expensive whiskey, loud and belligerent. He thinks he's better than us?" Ethan's voice snarled from my laptop speakers. "Mr. Big Shot Analyst with his fancy suits and his corner office. He's nothing. He's a nobody with a paycheck. He owes us. He owes me everything. One day, I swear to God, I'm gonna make him pay for his disrespect." And then, chillingly in the background, you could hear my mother's voice, not angry at Ethan, but speaking into the phone, presumably to me. Her voice was syrupy and condescending. "Now, Marcus, don't provoke your brother. You know how he gets when he's upset." It was the smoking gun, a clear threat, with my mother's explicit enablement captured for all to hear. We had our evidence. We had our strategy. But the weight of it all, the constant fighting, the public humiliation, the sheer ugliness of it, was starting to crush me. The breaking point came a week before the first major hearing. I'd just come from a grueling 4-hour psychiatric evaluation with one of the court-appointed doctors. It felt like a mental autopsy. Every decision, every emotion, every part of my life dissected and examined for flaws. I got back to my beautiful, empty apartment, and the silence was deafening. The legal bills were piling up into the tens of thousands. My reputation at work was hanging by a thread. My own family was systematically trying to destroy me. I picked up the phone and called Nick. My voice came out cracked and hollow, a stranger's voice. "I can't do this anymore," I said, sinking onto the sofa that now felt like an extravagant mistake. The fight was gone. I just felt empty, scooped out. "What are you talking about, man? We're so close. Jessica says we have them on the ropes." "Close to what? Ruining my career? Spending every single dollar I've ever saved? For what, Nick? For pride. The questions poured out of me, a torrent of doubt and despair that I had been holding back for weeks. Maybe they're right. Maybe I am broken. Maybe this is all my fault. Maybe it would be easier to just give them the money. Let them have it. I can sell the apartment, pay them off, and disappear. Start over somewhere else where no one knows my name. Is it really worth all this? There was a long silence on the other end of the line. For a terrifying second, I thought he was going to agree with me, to give me the permission I was secretly seeking to just give up. Okay, Nick said finally, his voice soft but firm as steel. You can do that. You can walk away. But before you do, I want you to remember something. I want you to remember sitting in our dorm room, showing me the budget you made so you could afford tuition and books while working 2 jobs. Because your parents said they couldn't help out this year. I want you to remember being 17 and washing dishes while we were all at prom. Remember eating instant noodles for a year so you could afford the down payment on your own place, a place they felt entitled to walk into and demand a piece of? They're not just asking for your money, Marcus. They are trying to erase every single sacrifice you ever made. They want to prove that all your hard work, all your pain, all your discipline meant nothing. That you are nothing without them. He paused, letting his words sink in. You're not fighting for your money anymore. You're fighting for that 13-year-old kid who had to give up his birthday cash. You're fighting for that 17-year-old who deserved to go to his damn prom. You're fighting for you. Don't let them win. Don't you dare let them erase you. Tears were streaming down my face, hot and silent. He was right. Every word was a blow, knocking away the despair and replacing it with something else. A fire. The same fire I'd felt in Yvette's office. It wasn't about the money. It was about my life. It was about my soul. Okay, I said, my voice thick but steady. Okay, Nick, I'm in. Let's go to war. The day of the hearing arrived with a cold, gray dawn that matched the knot of ice in my stomach. The courtroom was an intimidating cathedral of justice, all polished dark wood, towering ceilings, and hushed, reverent tones. It felt less like a room and more like an arena, and I was one of the gladiators. My team, me, flanked by Jessica's sharp, focused energy and Yvette's calm, steadying presence, sat at one long table. Across the aisle sat my family. My mother, Diana, was dressed in a conservative navy blue suit, a string of pearls at her neck, the very picture of worried, maternal grace. My father, Derek, sat beside her, looking pale and shrunken, his eyes fixed on the table in front of him. And Ethan, for once, wasn't smirking. He looked nervous, constantly fidgeting with his tie, his gaze darting around the room like a cornered animal. Their lawyer, Carson Whitfield, gave us a confident, almost bored smirk. Judge Eleanor Rhee presided over the proceedings. She was in her late 60s with sharp, intelligent eyes and a reputation for being incredibly perceptive and having zero tolerance for courtroom theatrics. I held onto that thought like a life raft. Whitfield went first. He was smooth and eloquent, weaving a tragic tale for the judge. He painted a picture of me as a brilliant but troubled young man, cracking under the immense pressure of his own success. He spoke of my withdrawal from the family, my obsessive work habits, and my financially irresponsible purchase of a new apartment. He made my refusal to fund Ethan's latest venture sound not like a sound financial decision, but like a symptom of a paranoid delusion. He claimed my family was only acting out of love and a desperate concern for my well-being. Then he called my mother to the stand. Diana was a master performer. She walked to the stand with a look of pained reluctance. She dabbed at her eyes with a perfectly folded handkerchief as she described my supposed descent into instability. She spoke of my erratic moods and how I had pushed them away when all they wanted to do was help. "We're just so worried, Your Honor," she said, her voice trembling with manufactured emotion. "All we want is to protect him, to help him manage his affairs until he's well again. This is the hardest thing I've ever had to do." When it was Jessica's turn to cross-examine, she approached the stand with a calm, measured confidence that seemed to suck the air out of the room. The real battle was about to begin. Mrs. Reynolds, Jessica began, her voice polite but firm as granite. You've painted a very moving picture of a deeply concerned mother. Let's talk about that concern. Is it a recent development? Oh, no, Diana said earnestly, falling into the trap. I've always worried about Marcus. He's always been so sensitive, so intense. Sensitive? Jessica repeated, letting the word hang in the air for a moment. Is that why you began seeking psychological evaluations for him when he was just a child? Diana's composure flickered. It was a tiny, almost imperceptible tightening around her eyes, but I saw it. I was just being a thorough parent, exploring all avenues for his well-being. A thorough parent, Jessica echoed, picking up a file from her table. According to these records from Dr. Harriet Wilson, Marcus's childhood pediatrician, which we have submitted as evidence, you took Marcus to 3 different child psychologists before the age of 10. You were trying to get a diagnosis for everything from oppositional defiant disorder to anxiety. None of them found anything clinically wrong with him. In fact, Dr. Wilson noted here in a file from 1994 that she suspected you were, and I quote, shopping for a diagnosis. Is that how you show concern, Mrs. Reynolds? By trying to have your healthy 7-year-old child labeled as mentally ill? Carson Whitfield jumped to his feet. Objection. Relevance. It speaks directly to a long-term pattern of behavior and intent, Your Honor. Jessica shot back without even looking at him. It is highly relevant to the petitioner's credibility. I'll allow it, Judge Reese said, her sharp eyes fixed on Diana. The witness will answer the question. Diana stammered, her face flushed. I was just exploring all options. A good mother worries. Jessica moved on, relentless. Let's talk about another family gathering. Thanksgiving 2 years ago. Do you recall your son Ethan getting into a rather heated argument with Marcus on the phone? Boys will be boys, Diana said dismissively, waving her hand as if it were a trifle. They have their disagreements. This was more than a disagreement, wasn't it, Mrs. Reynolds? In fact, your son Ethan threatened Marcus, didn't he? I certainly don't recall that, Diana lied coolly, her jaw tight. Perhaps this will refresh your memory, Jessica said, signaling to Nick, who was seated at the tech table. He pressed a key on his laptop. Ethan's drunken, snarling voice filled the silent courtroom, crystal clear. He thinks he's better than us. He's a nobody with a paycheck. He owes us. He owes me everything. One day, I swear to God, I'm gonna make him pay for his disrespect. A collective gasp rippled through the gallery. I chanced to look at my father. His face was ashen. Ethan had sunk down in his chair, trying to disappear. Jessica let the silence hang for a beat before speaking. That was your son, Ethan, threatening your other son, Marcus. And in the background of that recording, we can hear your voice. You weren't telling Ethan to stop, were you, Mrs. Reynolds? You were telling Marcus, the victim of the threat, not to provoke his aggressor. Is that your idea of protecting your sensitive son? Diana was speechless. She just sat there, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. The image of the concerned mother was beginning to crumble. But Jessica wasn't done. She was just getting to the heart of the matter. Mrs. Reynolds, you testified that your family's only concern is Marcus's well-being. But this petition isn't just about his well-being, is it? It's about his money. Specifically, the $350,000 you demanded from him just weeks before filing this petition. That was a family investment, Diana insisted, her voice rising, becoming shrill. An investment in a man who has failed at 3 previous businesses, funded by his own father's retirement savings and a second mortgage on his parents' home? Jessica countered, her voice laced with incredulity. That doesn't sound like a sound investment, Mrs. Reynolds. It sounds like a desperate shakedown. Now for the kill shot, the one that would end it all. Jessica walked back to our table and picked up a thick, bound document. Your Honor, we have here a full forensic accounting report of the McBride Family Trust, established in 1990 by Mrs. Reynolds' late father, to be managed for his grandchildren. She turned back to my mother, her eyes glinting like chips of ice. "Mrs. Reynolds, can you please tell the court why, over the past 2 decades, over $2 million from that trust, a trust that was legally stipulated to be split evenly between your 2 children, was funneled exclusively, through a series of complex transactions, into accounts controlled by you and your son, Ethan?" The room was dead silent. My mother stared at Jessica, her face a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred. This was the secret she had guarded for 30 years. "And can you explain," Jessica's voice dropped, becoming deadly serious, "why this systematic diversion of funds began just a few months after you had your son's official birth certificate amended?" She placed a certified copy of a document on the witness stand in front of Diana. It was my original birth certificate, the one her team had successfully petitioned the court to unseal just a week prior. "Can you explain to the court why the name on this document is Lucian Thomas Reeves, and why you committed what amounts to felony perjury by naming Derek Reynolds as the biological father on the amended document you filed in 1995? Was it, Mrs. Reynolds, because as the legal son of Derek Reynolds, it was much easier for you to control Marcus's finances as part of a single family unit, thereby allowing you to systematically drain his half of the inheritance to fund the lifestyle of your favored son, Ethan? It was over. Every lie, every secret, every dirty, rotten thing she had ever done was laid bare for the entire world to see under the cold, fluorescent lights of the courtroom. There was no escape. Diana stared at the document, her hand trembling. Then she looked up at the judge, then at her husband, then finally her eyes met mine. The mask of the loving mother didn't just crack. It shattered into a million pieces, revealing the ugly, greedy, monstrous truth that had been hiding beneath all along. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She had been so thoroughly, so completely, so surgically dismantled that there was nothing left to say. Jessica Davenport walked back to our table and sat down. She gave my hand a slight, reassuring squeeze under the table. "Checkmate," she whispered. The silence that followed Jessica's final, devastating question was the loudest sound I had ever heard. It stretched for what felt like an eternity, a vacuum that sucked all the air out of the room. It was the sound of a life built on lies collapsing in on itself. Judge Ree stared down at my mother on the stand, her expression a mask of cold, judicial fury. Diana just sat there, trembling, a statue of a woman carved from shock and humiliation. Finally, the judge spoke, her voice ringing with an authority that seemed to shake the very walls. "This court has heard enough." She looked directly at my family's lawyer, Carson Whitfield, who suddenly looked pale and sick, as if he'd just realized the depth of the fraud he'd been paid to represent. "Mr. Whitfield, this petition is not only denied, it is dismissed with prejudice, meaning it can never be filed again. It is, without a doubt, one of the most frivolous and malicious abuses of the justice system I have seen in my 12 years on this bench." Then, she turned her formidable gaze upon my family. "The evidence presented here today suggests a multi-decade conspiracy to commit financial fraud, perjury, and the falsification of legal documents. Therefore, this court is referring the entirety of this case file, including the transcripts and all submitted evidence, to the district attorney's office for immediate criminal investigation." She banged her gavel. The sharp crack echoed like a gunshot in the silent room. "We are adjourned." It was done. I had won. But I didn't feel the rush of elation I had expected. I just felt numb. The adrenaline that had been coursing through my veins for months drained away, leaving a hollow ache in its place. The war was over, but the battlefield was my own life. As people began to stir and file out of the gallery, a quiet chaos erupted at the other table. Ethan was frantically whispering to his lawyer, his face a mask of panic. My mother was staring straight ahead, her eyes vacant, seeing nothing. And my father, Derek, finally looked at me. His eyes were filled with a sorrow so deep it was almost black. He looked like a man who had woken up from a 30-year coma to find his whole world had burned down around him. He took a half step towards me, his hands slightly outstretched, his mouth opening as if to say something, anything. But then Diana, snapping out of her stupor, grabbed his arm, her grip like a vice, and pulled him back. Her look was pure poison. I stood up, my own legs feeling unsteady. Yvette put a protective arm around my shoulder. "Let's get you out of here," she said softly. As we walked towards the main doors, we had to pass their table. My mother's head snapped up. Her eyes, no longer blank, burned with a venomous hatred that was terrifying in its intensity. "You," she hissed, her voice low and raspy, meant only for me to hear. "You did this. You aired our dirty laundry. You destroyed your own family." I stopped and looked at her, truly looked at her, without the filter of fear or childish obligation for the first time in my life. The woman who had given birth to me was a stranger, a villain in a story I was finally escaping. "No, Diana," I said, my voice quiet but clear and steady. "You did this. You destroyed it a long time ago. I just turned on the lights." We walked out of the courthouse and into the bright, indifferent sunlight of the afternoon. The weight of the world felt like it had been lifted from my shoulders, but a phantom ache remained, a reminder of the amputation that had just taken place. Later that day, back in Jessica's sleek, minimalist office, we went over the final details. We were joined by Yvette. The three of us sat there, a strange but effective team. Jessica explained that the judge had placed a temporary injunction on all of Diana and Ethan's known assets, pending the DA's investigation. There would be more legal proceedings to come, this time with them as the defendants in a criminal case, but my part in it was essentially over. "They won't be bothering you again, Marcus," Jessica said, offering me a rare, small smile. "You're free." Free. It was a strange word. I had spent my entire life in a cage I didn't even know existed, its bars woven from lies and manipulation. Now that the door was open, I wasn't sure how to walk out. As Yvette and I were leaving the law office, I saw a lone figure waiting for me across the street, standing awkwardly near a bus stop. It was my father. He was alone. He looked old and frail, a stark contrast to the imposing figure who used to lecture me about responsibility. He saw me and walked over, his steps hesitant, his shoulders slumped in defeat. "Marcus," he said, his voice barely a whisper. I just stood there, waiting. Yvette gave my arm a supportive squeeze and took a few steps back to give us space. I had nothing left to say to him. I'm sorry," he stammered, his eyes welling up with tears he couldn't seem to stop. I knew. Not all of it, I swear to God, not the details about the trust fund. But I knew she wasn't fair to you. I knew it was wrong. All those years, I did nothing. I was a coward. He looked down at his scuffed shoes, a broken man confessing his sins on a downtown sidewalk. She was just so strong, so determined, and I was weak. I was afraid of her anger, afraid of being alone, and my weakness cost you a childhood. There is no excuse for that. None. I looked at this man, my father in name but not in blood, and the anger I thought I would feel simply wasn't there. The hatred had burned out, leaving only ashes. I felt nothing but a profound, weary pity. He was a casualty of his own weakness, another victim of Diana's long, destructive reign. I gave a single, slow nod. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't absolution. It was just an acknowledgement, an ending to our chapter. Your cowardice is not my burden to carry anymore, Derek, I said, my voice quiet but firm. He seemed to understand. He flinched as if I'd struck him, then nodded, a tear finally tracing a path down his wrinkled cheek. He turned and walked away, disappearing into the evening crowd, a ghost from a life that was no longer mine. I stood there for a long time watching him go, before turning to walk towards my own future, whatever that might be. The year that followed the trial was one of quiet, deliberate reconstruction. It was like learning how to walk again after a lifetime in a cast. My emotional muscles atrophied and unsure. The first, most crucial step was reclaiming my name. It was a simple legal process, but it felt like a profound act of liberation. I officially changed my name from Marcus Reynolds to Marcus Reeves, taking the name of the biological father I'd never known. Felt right. It felt like I was finally closing a book that had been written by someone else and opening a blank one, all my own. The legal fallout for my former family was swift and severe, a distant drumbeat I heard about through Yvette. Faced with an ironclad criminal case, Diana took a plea deal, reportedly to protect Ethan from a harsher sentence. She was convicted of felony fraud and perjury and served 18 months in a low-security federal prison. Ethan, convicted of wire fraud, was sentenced to 5 years of probation and ordered to pay a restitution that I knew, and frankly didn't care if I ever saw. Derek, true to his final words to me, filed for divorce. The sham empire they had built on my stolen inheritance had crumbled to dust. I never sought them out, and they never contacted me. They had become ghosts, echoes from another life, and I was determined to leave them in the past. My own life, in stark contrast, began to flourish in the newfound silence. At work, the cloud of suspicion and gossip lifted, replaced by a quiet, unspoken respect from my colleagues. Sophia, true to her word, had my back completely. She promoted me again 9 months later, this time to a managing director position. My success felt different now. It wasn't about proving anything to my parents or to the world anymore. It was just mine, earned and owned. But I knew, deep down, that I had to do something more with my victory. It couldn't just be about personal gain, about a bigger office and a larger salary. That would feel too hollow. I thought about the trust fund, the money that should have been mine, that should have given me a fair start in life. And I thought about all the other kids out there like me, the invisible ones, the responsible ones, the ones whose potential is systematically sacrificed for a favored, often failing sibling. With Yvette's guidance and a significant portion of my own money, I established the Thomas Reeves Scholarship Fund. It was a nonprofit dedicated to providing full-ride college scholarships for high-achieving students who could demonstrate a background of being in a toxic or unsupportive family environment. The first fundraising gala for the foundation, held a year after the trial, was a massive turning point for me. I stood at a podium in a downtown hotel ballroom, looking out at a room full of 300 people. Philanthropists, business leaders, community members, who were there to support a cause born from my deepest pain. I had to give a speech to tell a sanitized but powerful version of my story. Many of us in this room are fortunate to have had families who lifted us up, who were the wind beneath our wings. I began, my voice clear and steady over the microphone. But some of us, through no fault of our own, have to learn to fly with anchors tied to our feet. This fund is for them. It's a message to every young person out there who feels invisible in their own home. A message that your circumstances do not define your worth. Your strength does. Your resilience does. Your dreams matter. This is for the ones who were told they were secondary, to let them know that we see them and we believe in them. After the speech, as people were mingling and the fundraising numbers on the big screen climbed higher and higher, my Aunt Yvette came up to me, her eyes shining with tears and pride. "Thomas would have been so proud of you, Marcus," she said, squeezing my arm. "You have his heart. You've built a legacy for him and for yourself." That single sentence meant more to me than any promotion or paycheck ever could. Life settled into a new, peaceful rhythm. I had my challenging work, my true friends, my growing foundation. I had Nick, who was still my rock, and Yvette, who had become the loving, supportive, and fiercely intelligent family I'd never had. I was healing. Then, one rainy Tuesday afternoon, about 18 months after the trial, I received a letter at my office. It was in a plain white envelope with no return address, but I recognized the shaky, spidery handwriting on the front immediately. It was from Derek. My hands trembled slightly as I used a letter opener to slice it open. It wasn't a plea for forgiveness or a demand for anything. It was just a confession, a ghost's whisper. "Marcus," it began, "I don't expect you to read this, and I don't blame you if you throw it away. I just needed to say it, if only to this piece of paper. I'm living alone now, in a small one-bedroom apartment across town. Diana is out. She's living with a cousin in Florida. We don't speak. Ethan is working as a stocker at a grocery store, trying to pay off his restitution. It's all gone. The house, the money, everything. I spend a lot of time thinking about the past. It's all I have left, really. I think about all the times I looked the other way. Every time she bought Ethan a new car and told you to take the bus. Every time she celebrated his C-average report card and ignored your straight A's because you were the smart one and didn't need the praise. I saw it all. And I was a coward. I was afraid of her, Marcus. Terrified of her anger. Terrified of being alone. My weakness cost you a childhood. There is no excuse for that. I know I wasn't your real father, but for a little while I was supposed to be, and I failed at that too. I just hope, wherever you are, that you have found some peace. You deserve it more than anyone I know. Derek. I read the letter twice, the words blurring slightly the second time. There was no anger left in me, no bitterness. Just a quiet, profound sadness for the man who had let fear dictate the entire course of his life. I folded the letter neatly and, when I got home, I placed it in a small wooden box in my closet. The box held a few other mementos of my old life. A photo of me and Ethan as young, seemingly happy kids, my high school diploma, the program from the Foundation's first gala. It was my past. I wasn't running from it anymore. I was accepting it, all of it, the good, the bad, and the ugly. I was putting it in a box, not to forget, but to contain it. To acknowledge that it was a part of my story, but it was not the whole story. The rest of the pages were mine and only mine to write. Tonight, I'm sitting on the balcony of my apartment, the same one that once felt like a battleground. Now it's a sanctuary. The city lights glitter below, a sea of a million other stories, a million other lives. Yvette and Nick are here with me. We're sharing a bottle of good scotch, celebrating nothing in particular, which I've learned is sometimes the best thing to celebrate. The air is comfortable, filled with the easy silence that only exists between people who know each other's deepest truths and love each other anyway. You know, I admit, swirling the amber liquid in my glass, I thought winning would feel different, cleaner. For a long time after the trial, even when everything was going right, I'd have these moments where I just feel empty, like I'd won the war but had to burn down my own homeland in the process. Nick leaned back in his chair, looking up at the sliver of moon in the night sky. You didn't burn it down, man. You just exposed what was already rotten to the core. You can't destroy something that was never really built on solid ground to begin with. He was right. My image of family had been an illusion, a carefully curated photograph that looked nothing like the real, messy, painful thing. The trial had ripped that photograph in half, and for a long while all I could see were the jagged, ugly edges. Justice doesn't bring happiness, Marcus, Yvette said, her voice wise and kind. A balm to a wound I didn't even know was still there. She reached over and placed her hand on mine. It's not supposed to. It just brings truth. Happiness is what you have to build for yourself afterwards, with the truth as your foundation. And looking around at them, at the life I had so painstakingly built, I realized I was finally doing it. I had built something real, something honest, on that foundation of hard-won truth. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. It was a printout of a donation confirmation to the Reeves Scholarship Fund that had come in last week. It was an anonymous donation, but the person had included a short note. It just said, "For the boy who deserved to go to his prom. I'm glad you finally got to dance." It was from Sarah, my high school prom date. She had seen an article about the foundation online and connected the dots. After all these years, she remembered. I showed the note to Nick and Yvette. And for the first time, thinking about that kid washing dishes on prom night didn't bring a sting of pain or resentment. It brought a quiet, gentle sense of peace. All those little sacrifices, all those moments of being invisible, they hadn't been erased. They had been reforged into something powerful. Something that could help someone else learn to fly. My name is Marcus Reeves. It's my own. The story of my past doesn't define me anymore. It just reminds me of how strong I had to become to survive it. The ghosts are finally quiet. The future is finally and completely mine. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it touched you in some way. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to fight to reclaim your own narrative? Share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss what's next.